In the sleepy village of St. Mary's Mead, a locked office hides a chilling secret. Accountant Thomas Harrow lies stabbed, a dagger in his chest, a page torn from his blood-stained ledger. Hercule Poirot, the master detective, unravels a web of deception. Suspects with hidden motives, a cunning lock trick, and a trail of embezzled funds. Was it the volatile client, the secretive secretary, or the charming partner? In just 30 seconds, step into a classic Agatha Christie mystery where every clue counts and the truth lies in the crimson ledger's shadow. Chapter 1. The Locked Door. The autumn mist clung to the cobblestones of St. Mary's Mead, a quaint village where the passage of time seemed to pause in deference to tradition. On this particular morning, however, the tranquillity was shattered by a piercing scream that echoed from the modest offices of Harrow and Sons, accountants, nestled between the baker's shop and the post office. The scream drew a small crowd, Mrs. Bantry from the greengrocer's, young Tommy Pierce with his delivery bicycle, and a handful of curious passers-by, all craning their necks toward the first-floor window where the sound had originated. Inside the village inn, Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective, sat opposite his old friend, Captain Hastings. The two had retreated to St. Mary's Mead for a brief respite, Poirot having declared London's bustle an affront to his little grey cells. He sipped his tisane, a delicate blend he insisted the innkeeper prepare to his exact specifications, while Hastings, ever the Englishman, nursed a cup of strong tea. Their conversation, a light discourse on the virtues of rural life, was interrupted by the arrival of Constable Pock, his face flushed and his helmet slightly askew. "Monsieur Poirot, sir," Pock panted, drawing the attention of the inn's few patrons. "We need your help. There's been a murder. Mr. Thomas Harrow, stabbed dead in his office, and the door locked tight as a drum. No way in or out, and the key in his pocket." Poirot's moustache quivered slightly, a telltale sign of his piqued interest. He set down his cup with deliberate care, his green eyes narrowing. "A locked room, you say? Most intriguing, Constable. The impossible is never so impossible when one applies method. Lead on, if you please." Hastings, ever eager for adventure, grabbed his coat, and the trio made their way through the gathering crowd to the offices of Harrow and Sons. The building was unassuming, its brick facade weathered, but respectable, with a polished brass plaque announcing the firm's name. A narrow staircase led to the first floor, where a small outer office housed a typewriter and stacks of files. Beyond it, a sturdy oak door, now the center of attention, stood closed, its lock gleaming under the constable's lantern. Polk recounted the morning's events with a tremor in his voice. Miss Clara Winters, the firm's secretary, had arrived at 8:00 to find the outer office empty. Assuming Mr. Harrow was already at work, she began her duties until, at 8:30, she knocked on his door to deliver the morning post. Receiving no answer, she tried the handle, found it locked, and grew alarmed. Fetching Mr. Jenkins, the baker, from next door, they forced the door open, only to discover Harrow slumped over his desk, a dagger protruding from his chest. Poirot listened intently, his head tilted like a bird assessing its surroundings. "And this door? It was locked from the inside, oui? The key was where?" "In his pocket, sir," Polk replied, producing a small brass key from an evidence bag. "No one else has a copy, according to Miss Winters. The window was latched too, and there's no other way in." "Formidable," Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of a puzzle. "Let us see this scene of the impossible crime." The office was a study in order, save for the grim spectacle at its centre. Thomas Harrow, a man in his late 50s with thinning hair and a stern countenance even in death, lay across his desk, his head resting on a blood-stained ledger. The dagger, an ornate piece with a carved handle, was embedded in his chest, the wound suggesting a single, forceful blow. The ledger, bound in dark leather, lay open, its pages meticulously filled with figures, except for a jagged tear where one page had been removed. A fountain pen had rolled to the floor, and an ink pot had spilled, leaving a dark pool that mingled with the blood. Poirot moved with the precision of a watchmaker, his gloved hands hovering over the scene without touching. He noted the position of the body, the angle of the dagger, and the faint smudge of ink on Harrow's fingers. His gaze lingered on the doorframe, where a barely perceptible scratch marred the polished wood. "Curieux," he said softly, almost to himself. "This scratch, it is not accidental. And the ledger, why remove a single page?" Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, frowned. "It's a queer business, Poirot. A locked room, a missing page. Sounds like something out of a penny. Dreadful." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Non, mon ami. A penny dreadful lacks the elegance of truth. This crime, it has a purpose, a design. The locked door is not a barrier, but a clue, and the missing page, it is the heart of the matter." Constable Pork, hovering nervously, ventured, "We've got 3 suspects so far, sir. Mr. Reginald Blake, a client who was seen arguing with Harrow yesterday. Miss Winters, the secretary, and Mr. Edward Sloane, Harrow's partner, who's away in London. Or so he says." Poirot nodded, his mind already turning. "Bon, we shall speak with them all. But first, the room must tell its story. The little details, Hastings. They whisper what the murderer hopes to silence." As the morning sun filtered through the latched window, casting long shadows across the blood-stained desk, Poirot stood motionless, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The locked door, the torn ledger, the solitary scratch. They were pieces of a puzzle only he could assemble. "The impossible," he said at last, turning to Hastings with a gleam in his eye, "is merely the improbable in disguise, and Hercule Poirot shall unmask it." Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The air in the offices of Harrow and Sons carried a faint metallic tang, a grim reminder of the violence that had shattered the morning's calm in St. Mary's Mead. Hercule Poirot stood at the threshold of Thomas Harrow's office, his compact figure framed by the sturdy oak door that had so confounded Constable Pork. The room beyond, bathed in the pale light filtering through a single, tightly latched window, was a tableau of order disrupted by death. Captain Hastings, lingering at Poirot's elbow, shifted uneasily, his gaze darting to the grim figure of Harrow slumped across his desk. The constable, stationed by the door, mopped his brow with a handkerchief, his earlier agitation barely subdued. Poirot's green eyes, sharp as cut glass, surveyed the scene with meticulous care. He moved forward with the deliberate grace of a cat, his polished shoes silent on the polished floorboards. The office was modest, but dignified, its oak-panelled walls adorned with a single-framed certificate proclaiming Harrow's membership in the Chartered Accountants Society. A heavy mahogany desk dominated the room, its surface cluttered with the tools of Harrow's trade. A ledger, its dark leather cover marred by a stain of drying blood. A fountain pen, lying askew as if flung in haste, and an ink-pot overturned, its contents pooling in a dark, viscous smear that mingled with the blood seeping from Harrow's wound. The dagger, its ornate handle carved with a pattern of vines, protruded from the accountant's chest, a silent accusation in the stillness. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot murmured, almost as if addressing the corpse, "you have left us a puzzle most intriguing." He bent closer, his gloved hands hovering over the body without touching, his moustache twitching as he noted the angle of the dagger. It had been driven in with force, the blade piercing the heart with surgical precision. Harrow's face, frozen in death, bore an expression of surprise rather than pain, as if the blow had caught him unawares. His right hand, still clutching a scrap of blotting paper, bore a faint smudge of ink, and his spectacles had slipped to the tip of his nose, giving him an air of bewildered dignity. Poirot straightened, his gaze shifting to the ledger. Its pages, meticulously inscribed with columns of figures, were a testament to Harrow's fastidious nature. Yet one page, near the centre, had been torn out, leaving a jagged edge that spoke of haste or desperation. "This ledger," Poirot said, turning to Hastings, "it is the heart of the matter, mon ami. Why remove a single page? What secret did it hold that was worth a man's life?" Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, frowned. "Perhaps it was a personal matter, Poirot, a debt or a scandal. Accountants see all sorts of secrets, don't they?" "Précisément," Poirot replied, his voice soft but laced with conviction. "But a secret worth killing for is no ordinary indiscretion. It is a matter of great consequence, and we shall find it in the details." He turned his attention to the door, its lock gleaming under the light of Polk's lantern. The key, produced from Harrow's pocket, lay on a side table, its brass surface unmarred by scratches or wear. Poirot knelt, his magnifying glass in hand, and examined the keyhole with the intensity of a jeweller inspecting a flawed gem. A faint groove, barely visible to the naked eye, caught his attention. "Curieux," he murmured, tracing the groove with a gloved finger. "This lock, it is not so simple as it appears. There is something hidden." Constable Polk, hovering nearby, cleared his throat. "The lock's solid, sir. No sign of tampering, and Miss Winters swears there's only the one key. The window's latched tight, too. No way anyone could have got in or out." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "And yet, Constable, someone did. A murder does not commit itself. The impossibility of the locked room is but a challenge to the little grey cells." He moved to the window, a narrow casement set high in the wall. The latch, rusted from disuse, was firmly in place, and the glass showed no signs of being forced. Outside, the street below bustled with the morning's activity, Mrs. Bantry haggling with a fishmonger, Tommy Pierce weaving through the crowd on his bicycle. But the window offered no vantage for an intruder. Poirot tapped the sill thoughtfully, his gaze lingering on a faint smudge of dust disturbed near the latch. "Perhaps," he said softly, "the window is not the answer, but it, too, has a story to tell." Returning to the desk, Poirot examined the spilled ink pot, its contents forming a dark pool that had seeped into the wood. The fountain pen, a quality instrument with a gold nib, lay near Harrow's hand, as if he had been writing moments before his death. Poirot lifted the pen, noting its weight, and then turned to the blotting paper clutched in Harrow's fist. A faint impression of numbers was visible, reversed as if pressed from a page. "Hastings," Poirot said, holding the paper to the light. "This is no random scribble. These figures. They are a clue, a shadow of the missing page." Hastings squinted at the paper. "Looks like a jumble to me, Poirot. Could be anything. Accounts, debts, even a code." "A code, perhaps," Poirot mused, "but more likely a record." Monsieur Harrow was a man of precision. His final act was to protect something, or to expose it. Poirot's attention shifted to a small scratch on the doorframe, a mark so slight it might have been overlooked by a less discerning eye. He ran his finger along it, noting its depth and angle. "This scratch," he said, almost to himself. "It is not the work of carelessness. It is deliberate, purposeful. Something was here, something that moved." Constable Palk, growing impatient, ventured, "What does it mean, sir?" "The scratch, the ink, the ledger, how do they fit?" Poirot turned, his eyes alight with the thrill of discovery. "They fit, Constable, because they must. Every crime is a picture, painted with care or with haste. This one, it is painted with cunning. The locked door, the missing page, the scratch. They are brush strokes, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall reveal the canvas." He stepped back, taking in the room as a whole. The bookshelves, lined with ledgers and reference texts, were undisturbed. A coat rack in the corner held Harrow's overcoat and hat, both neatly hung. A small fireplace, cold and unused, sat against one wall, its hearth clean save for a faint dusting of ash. Poirot's gaze lingered on the hearth, his mind turning. "Ash," he said softly. "Even in a cold grate it speaks. Perhaps the missing page met its fate here." Hastings, ever practical, interjected, "But why burn just one page, Poirot? If it was evidence, why not take the whole ledger?" "Because, mon ami, the whole ledger would be missed at once. A single page, torn in haste, can be explained away. A clerical error, a misfiling. But its absence betrays the murderer's intent." Poirot knelt by the fireplace, sifting through the ash with a small stick. A tiny fragment of the paper, charred at the edges, caught his eye. He retrieved it with tweezers, holding it to the light. The fragment bore a single digit, a 7, in Harrow's precise handwriting. "A small thing," Poirot said, "but in the hands of Hercule Poirot, even the smallest thing becomes significant." He rose, dusting his gloves with a handkerchief, and turned to Pork. "Constable, I shall need to see the outer office, where Mademoiselle Winters works. And then we must speak with the suspects. Their words, their silences. They will tell us much." The outer office was a stark contrast to Harrow's sanctum. A cluttered desk held a typewriter, stacks of files, and a tray of correspondence. A calendar on the wall marked the date, October 14th, 1925, and a small vase of wilted chrysanthemums added a touch of faded chur. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, noting a coat slung carelessly over a chair and a pair of gloves, neatly folded, beside the typewriter. "Mademoiselle Winters," he said. "She is efficient, but perhaps not without her own secrets." Hastings, ever curious, picked up a file from the desk, only to be met with Poirot's sharp glance. "Mon ami, do not disturb the scene. The placement of objects, it is as important as the objects themselves." Chastened, Hastings replaced the file. "Sorry, old chap. Just thought it might hold a clue." "It may," Poirot conceded. "But we shall find it with method, not with haste." Poirot moved to the typewriter, pressing a key experimentally. The ribbon, freshly inked, produced a crisp letter. He nodded, satisfied, and then examined the coat. A faint scent of lavender clung to it, suggesting its owner was female. "Mademoiselle Winters, perhaps," he said, "or another who visits this office. We shall see." He turned to Polk, who was watching with a mixture of awe and impatience. "Constable, tell me of the suspects. Monsieur Blake, Mademoiselle Winters, Monsieur Sloane. Who are they, and what is their connection to the late Monsieur Harrow?" Polk, eager to be useful, launched into a summary. "Mr. Reginald Blake's a client, sir. A big man in textiles. He's got a temper. Everyone in the village knows it. He was here yesterday, arguing with Harrow about some accounts. Miss Clara Winters is the secretary. Been with the firm 3 years. Quiet lass, keeps to herself, but sharp as a tack. Mr. Edward Sloane's Harrow's partner, a proper gentleman, always dressed to the nines. He's in London today, or so he says, meeting a client." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing each detail. "Bon. And the argument with Monsieur Blake, what was its nature?" "Something about discrepancies, sir. Blake was shouting loud enough for the baker to hear next door. Said Harrow was accusing him of something, but he wouldn't have it." "Accusations," Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. "They are dangerous things, Constable. They provoke, they wound, they kill." He returned to the inner office, standing once more before Harrow's body. The accountant's lifeless eyes seemed to plead for justice, and Poirot felt a familiar resolve settle over him. "Monsieur Harrow," he said softly, "you were a man of numbers, of order. Yet your death is chaos. I shall restore the balance, for that is the way of Hercule Poirot." He turned to Hastings, his expression resolute. "Come, mon ami. The scene is set. The players are named. Now we shall listen to their stories, and in their words, or their silences, we shall find the truth." As they left the office, the crowd outside had grown, their whispers a soft hum against the morning's chill. Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping over the villagers, and for a moment he seemed to see beyond them, to the heart of the mystery itself. "The scene of the crime," he said to Hastings. "It is not just a room, but a stage. And the murderer, he has played his part. But he cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." Chapter 3. The Suspects Assemble. The morning mist had lifted from St. Mary's Mead, leaving the village square bathed in a pale autumnal light that did little to warm the chill of the tragedy at Harrow and Sons. Hercule Poirot, having completed his meticulous examination of the crime scene, now stood in the outer office, where the air was thick with the scent of typewriter ink and the faint, lingering trace of Miss Winters' lavender perfume. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, adjusted his tie nervously, his eyes darting toward the door as Constable Polk ushered in the 3 individuals whose lives had been irrevocably entangled by Thomas Harrow's death. Poirot's posture was erect, his hands clasped behind his back, his moustache impeccably symmetrical. He observed the trio with the keenness of a falcon, noting every gesture, every flicker of expression. "Bon," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "We are gathered to unravel the mystery of Monsieur Harrow's death. Each of you, I am certain, has a story to tell. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall listen, not only to your words, but to the silences between them." The first to enter was Mr. Reginald Blake, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, whose ruddy complexion and heavy brows suggested a temperament as volatile as the textile mills that had made his fortune. His tweed suit, though well-tailored, was slightly dishevelled, as if he had dressed in haste. He carried a silver-topped cane, which he gripped tightly, his knuckles whitening as he surveyed the room. His eyes, dark and restless, avoided the closed door to Harrow's office, where the accountant's body still lay. Next came Miss Clara Winters, the secretary, a woman of perhaps 28, whose pale, delicate features were framed by a neat chignon of chestnut hair. Her grey dress was modest, her demeanour composed, but Poirot noted the faint tremor in her hands as she clasped them before her. She stood slightly apart, her gaze fixed on the floor, as if unwilling to meet the eyes of her companions, or perhaps the detective himself. Last was Mr. Edward Sloane, Harrow's business partner, who had arrived from London with an air of polished confidence that seemed almost theatrical. His suit was immaculate, his dark hair sleek with pomade, and his smile, though courteous, carried a hint of calculation. He leaned casually against the desk, one hand in his pocket, the other adjusting a gold cufflink. "A dreadful business, Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice smooth as polished oak. "I came as soon as I heard." Poirot inclined his head, his eyes never leaving Sloane's face. "Your promptness is noted, Monsieur Sloane. And yet a murder waits for no man. Let us begin." He gestured to a row of chairs arranged by Constable Pork, and the suspects seated themselves with varying degrees of reluctance. Blake sat heavily, his cane tapping an impatient rhythm on the floor. Winters perched on the edge of her chair, her hands still clasped tightly. Sloane crossed one leg over the other, his smile unwavering, as if he were attending a board meeting rather than a murder inquiry. Poirot paced slowly before them, his steps measured, his voice deliberate. "Monsieur Harrow was found this morning, stabbed in his locked office, a page torn from his ledger. The key was in his pocket. The window latched. The door unforced. A puzzle, none? Yet every puzzle has a solution, and every crime a motive. I wish to hear your accounts of this morning, where you were, what you did, what you saw." Blake spoke first, his voice gruff and tinged with defiance. "I was at my estate, Bramble Hall, all morning. Left the village yesterday, after a meeting with Harrow. My housekeeper can vouch for me. Mrs. Grayson, she's called. I was nowhere near this place when it happened." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your meeting with Monsieur Harrow? It was not amicable, I understand." "An argument, perhaps?" Blake's jaw tightened, and he shifted in his chair. "Harrow was poking his nose where it wasn't wanted, accusing me of mismanaging my accounts. Absolute rot. I told him so, and left. That was yesterday afternoon. Haven't been back since." "Accusations," Poirot said softly. "They are like sparks, Monsieur Blake. They ignite tempers, and sometimes worse. You left at what hour?" 4 o'clock, maybe 5, Blake muttered. "Ask Jenkins, the baker. He saw me go." Poirot made a mental note, his gaze lingering on Blake's cane, which bore a faint nick near the silver top. "Merci, monsieur. We shall verify. And you, Mademoiselle Winters?" Clara Winters raised her eyes, her voice steady but soft, like the rustle of leaves. "I arrived at 8, as always. The outer office was empty, and Mr. Harrow's door was closed. I assumed he was already working. He often came early. I sorted the post, typed some letters, and didn't think anything was wrong until—" Her voice faltered, and she swallowed. "Until I knocked and got no answer. I called Mr. Jenkins, and we found him." Poirot studied her, noting the way her fingers tightened around each other. "You heard nothing unusual, mademoiselle? No voices, no footsteps?" She shook her head. "Nothing, Mr. Poirot. Just the usual sounds. The typewriter, the street outside. It was so ordinary." "Ordinary," Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful. "And yet, mademoiselle, The ordinary can conceal the extraordinary. You have worked here 3 years, oui? You knew Monsieur Harrow well? Well enough, she said, her eyes flickering briefly toward Sloane before returning to the floor. He was a good employer, very particular about his work. Poirot's moustache twitched. That glance, so fleeting, spoke volumes. Bon. And you, Monsieur Sloane? Sloane leaned forward, his smile broadening. I was in London, Mr. Poirot, at the Savoy. Had a breakfast meeting with a client, Mr. Percival Langdon, a wine merchant. I caught the early train back when I got Pulk's telegram. Dreadful shock, of course. Poor old Harrow. Your meeting. It was at what time? Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. 7:30, Sloane replied smoothly. Langdon's a stickler for punctuality. We were done by 9, and I was at the station by 10. I've got the hotel bill, and the train ticket to prove it. Most convenient, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. A man with an alibi is like a house with a locked door. It invites scrutiny. You and Monsieur Harrow, you were partners for how long? 5 years, Sloane said, his smile unshaken. We built this firm together. He handled the numbers, I handled the clients. A perfect arrangement. Perfect, Poirot echoed, until it was not. Tell me, Monsieur Sloane, did you ever disagree with Monsieur Harrow? A business matter, perhaps? Sloane's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Oh, the usual tiffs. Harrow was a stickler, always fussing over details. But nothing serious. We were partners, not enemies. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Merci. You have all been most cooperative. For now you may go, but remain in the village. The truth, it has a way of emerging, like a seed from the earth. As the suspects rose, Poirot's gaze lingered on each. Blake's heavy tread and the tap of his cane echoed as he left, his shoulders hunched as if bearing a weight. Winters moved with quiet grace, but her eyes darted nervously toward the inner office door. Sloane, ever the gentleman, offered a polite nod before stepping out, his polished shoes gleaming in the sunlight. Hastings, watching them go, turned to Poirot. Well, Poirot, what do you make of them? Blake's got a temper, Winters is hiding something, and Sloane's too smooth by half. Poirot smiled faintly. You see much, mon ami, but you do not yet see clearly. Each has a mask, and behind each mask, a motive. Blake's anger, it is genuine, but is it murderous? Winters's silence, it speaks of loyalty, or fear. And Sloane, his charm is a shield. But what does it protect? He moved to the desk in the outer office, examining the typewriter once more. A half-finished letter lay beside it, addressed to a client in Harrow's precise hand. Poirot read it silently, his brow furrowing. This letter, he said, it is dated yesterday. Yet Mademoiselle Winters said she typed letters this morning. Why then, is this one handwritten? Hastings frowned. Perhaps Harrow wrote it himself? Perhaps, Poirot said. Or perhaps someone wished it to appear so. The little inconsistencies, Hastings, they are the threads that unravel the tapestry. He turned to Constable Polk, who had been hovering near the door, his notebook clutched tightly. Constable, I shall need to speak with the baker, Monsieur Jenkins, and verify Monsieur Blake's departure yesterday. Also, contact this Monsieur Langdon in London. His meeting with Monsieur Sloane interests me greatly. Polk nodded eagerly. Right away, sir. Anything else? Oui, Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. Examine the fireplace in Monsieur Harrow's office. The ash, it may hold more than we have seen. And be discreet, Constable. The murderer is among us, and they are watching. As Pork hurried off, Poirot stood motionless, his eyes distant. "The suspects assemble," he said to Hastings, "but the truth, it does not yet show its face. We must probe deeper, mon ami. The locked door, the missing page, the silent secretary, they are pieces of a puzzle, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall fit them together." The village clock struck noon, its chimes a solemn reminder of time's relentless march. Poirot adjusted his hat, his mind already turning to the next act in this deadly drama. The suspects had spoken, but their words were only the beginning. The truth, as always, lay in what they didn't say. Chapter 4. The client's temper. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the village square of St. Mary's Mead, its golden rays doing little to dispel the chill that lingered after the morning's grim discovery at Harrow and Sons. Hercule Poirot, with Captain Hastings trailing faithfully behind, made his way toward Bramble Hall, the sprawling estate of Mr. Reginald Blake, the first of the suspects to face the detective's probing scrutiny. The air was crisp, scented with fallen leaves and the faint smoke of distant chimneys, and Poirot's polished shoes crunched lightly on the gravel path as he walked, his mind as sharp and ordered as the clipped hedges lining the estate's drive. Bramble Hall was a testament to Blake's wealth, its red brick facade adorned with ivy and flanked by manicured lawns. Yet there was a certain ostentation in its grandeur, a hint of nouveau riche excess that Poirot noted with a subtle twitch of his moustache. "A man who builds such a house," he remarked to Hastings, "he wishes to proclaim his success. But success, mon ami, can mask many secrets." They were ushered into a drawing-room by Mrs. Grayson, the housekeeper, a stout woman with a brisk manner and eyes that darted nervously toward her employer. Blake stood by a roaring fire, his broad frame filling the room with an imposing presence. His ruddy face was set in a scowl, and his fingers gripped a glass of brandy, the liquid catching the firelight like amber. "Mr. Poirot," he said gruffly, gesturing to a pair of leather armchairs, "I don't see why you're here. I told you I was at home all morning. This is a waste of everyone's time." Poirot settled into a chair, his posture impeccable, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "Monsieur Blake, time is never wasted when it uncovers the truth. You are a man of passion, non? Your argument with Monsieur Harrow yesterday, it was heated, I understand. Tell me, what was its nature?" Blake's scowl deepened, and he took a swig of brandy before answering. "Harrow was out of line, that's what, accusing me of cooking my books, as if I'd stoop to such nonsense. My mills are thriving. Everyone in the county knows it. He had some fool idea about discrepancies in my accounts, said he'd found irregularities. I told him to mind his own business and left. That's all there was to it." Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the faint tremor in Blake's voice. "Irregularities, you say? Most interesting. And this argument, it took place in his office? At what hour?" "Around 4, Blake said, his tone curt. "I was there barely 10 minutes. Jenkins, the baker, saw me leave. Ask him." "Indeed I shall," Poirot said smoothly. "But let us be precise, monsieur. You left in anger, oui? And yet you returned home and remained here this morning, when Monsieur Harrow was killed. Mrs. Grayson confirms this." Blake nodded, his grip tightening on the glass. "She brought me breakfast at 7. I was in the study all morning, going over correspondence. Haven't left the estate since yesterday." Poirot's gaze drifted to Blake's hands, noting a faint blue stain on the cuff of his shirt, barely visible beneath the sleeve of his jacket. "Your cuff, Monsieur Blake," he said, his voice deceptively mild. "It bears a mark of ink, does it not? The same ink, perhaps, as that spilled on Monsieur Harrow's desk?" Blake glanced down, his expression flickering with surprise before he recovered. "Ink? Must have got it signing checks. I handle my own accounts sometimes. Nothing unusual about that." "Nothing unusual," Poirot echoed, his tone laced with a faint irony. "And yet, in a murder, everything is unusual. Tell me, monsieur, did you ever see the ledger from which the page was torn? Did Monsieur Harrow show you this irregularity?" Blake's eyes narrowed, and he set his glass down with a thud. "He waved that damned ledger at me, yes, said it proved something, but I didn't look at it. I don't need to pore over numbers to know my business is sound." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Bon, you are a man of action, not numbers. But action, monsieur, can lead to consequences. Your cane, for instance. It is a fine piece, non? May I see it?" Blake hesitated, then handed over the silver-topped cane. Poirot examined it closely, noting the nick near the handle, its edges sharp and recent. "A curious mark," he said, turning the cane in his gloved hands. "It reminds me of a scratch on the door-frame in Monsieur Harrow's office. A coincidence, perhaps." Blake's face reddened. "I don't know anything about scratches or door-frames. That cane's been with me for years. Gets knocked about, that's all." "Naturellement," Poirot said, returning the cane with a polite smile. "But the little grey cells, they notice such things. They wonder, they question, and they do not rest until the answers are clear." Hastings, who had been silent, leaned forward. "Look here, Blake, you can't deny you had a motive. If Harrow was accusing you of fraud, that's reason enough to want him out of the way." Blake shot to his feet, his voice booming. "Fraud? I'll not have my name dragged through the mud. I'm no murderer, and I won't be accused by some jumped-up detective and his sidekick." Poirot raised a hand, his calm unshaken. "Peace, monsieur. Accusations are not proof, but proof it will be found. You may be certain of that." He rose, adjusting his coat with a precise tug. "Merci for your time, Monsieur Blake. I shall speak with Mrs. Grayson and Monsieur Jenkins to confirm your movements. And perhaps, in time, you will recall more of this ledger." As they left the drawing-room, Mrs. Grayson appeared, her apron dusted with flour. She confirmed Blake's presence at breakfast, and throughout the morning, her voice steady, but her eyes avoiding Poirot's. "He was in his study, sir, just like he said. Never left the house." Poirot thanked her, his mind noting the slight hesitation in her words. "A loyal housekeeper," he said to Hastings as they stepped outside. "But loyalty, it can blind as well as bind." They made their way to the village square, where Jenkins's bakery was bustling with customers. The baker, a wiry man with flour-streaked hands, was wiping down his counter when Poirot approached. "Monsieur Jenkins," he said, "you saw Monsieur Blake leave the offices of Harrow and Sons yesterday. At what time, precisely?" Jenkins scratched his head, leaving a dusting of flour in his hair. "Must have been just after 4, Mr. Poirot. He was in a right state, slamming the door and muttering to himself. Looked like he'd had a row, all right." "And you saw no one else enter or leave the office after him?" Poirot asked, his eyes fixed on the baker's face. "Not a soul," Jenkins said. "Place was quiet till Miss Winters came this morning." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the details. "Merci, monsieur. You have been most helpful." As they walked back toward the inn, Hastings glanced at Poirot. "Well, Poirot, Blake's got a temper, no question. And that ink stain. It's suspicious, isn't it? Matches the ink on Harrow's desk. Suspicious? Oui, Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. But suspicion is not proof. The ink, it is a clue. But to what? A man who signs checks, he may have ink on his cuff. Yet the cane, the nick, the anger, they tell a story. Is it the story of a murderer, or merely a man provoked? He paused, his gaze distant. Monsieur Blake is a storm, Hastings. Loud, forceful, visible. But the true danger, it is often the quiet current beneath the waves. We must look to the others, to their silences, their secrets. The ledger, the lock, the scratch, they point to a truth we have not yet grasped. The village clock chimed 3, its notes echoing over the square. Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes gleaming with determination. Come, mon ami. The next act awaits. Mademoiselle Winters, she has a story to tell, and I suspect it will be most illuminating. Chapter 5. The Secretary's Secret. The late afternoon light filtered through the lace curtains of the small tea-room in St. Mary's Mead, casting delicate patterns on the white. Tablecloths. Hercule Poirot sat at a corner table, his tisane steaming gently before him, its herbal aroma a faint comfort against the weight of the morning's grim events. Captain Hastings, opposite him, fidgeted with a teaspoon, his brow furrowed as he contemplated the growing complexity of the case. They had come to meet Miss Clara Winters, the secretary of Harrow and Sons, whose quiet demeanour and fleeting glances had piqued Poirot's curiosity. She arrived promptly, her grey dress as neat as ever, but her pale face betrayed a tension that no amount of composure could fully mask. Poirot rose, offering a courteous bow. Mademoiselle Winters, merci for joining us. Please, sit. A cup of tea, perhaps. It soothes the nerves, non? Clara hesitated, then took a seat, her hands folding tightly in her lap. Thank you, Mr. Poirot. But I'm quite all right. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried a precision that spoke of careful control. Poirot studied her, his green eyes sharp, but not unkind. You are a woman of discipline, mademoiselle, a quality most admirable. 3 years at Harrow and Sons, managing the affairs of Monsieur Harrow and Monsieur Sloane. It is no small task. And yet, today, you have faced a tragedy. Tell me, how did you find the morning of this terrible event? Clara's gaze flickered to the window, where the village bustled quietly beyond. It was like any other morning, she began, her tone measured. I arrived at 8, as I always do. The outer office was empty, and Mr. Harrow's door was closed. I thought he was working. He often came early to review accounts. I sorted the post, typed 2 letters, and answered a telephone call from a client. It wasn't until 8:30, when I knocked to deliver the post, that I realized something was wrong. He didn't answer, and the door was locked. Poirot nodded, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. And you heard nothing unusual? No voices, no sounds from within the office? Nothing, she said, her eyes meeting his briefly before dropping again. Just the usual, the typewriter, the clock ticking, the street outside. It was so ordinary. Ordinary, Poirot repeated, his voice soft but probing. Yet within that ordinary morning, mademoiselle, a man was killed. You say the door was locked. Did you try the handle yourself? Yes, she replied, a faint flush rising to her cheeks. I turned it, but it wouldn't budge. That's when I grew worried and fetched Mr. Jenkins from the bakery. We forced the door together. Poirot's moustache twitched. Bon. And the key, it was found in Monsieur Harrow's pocket. You are certain there is no other?" Clara nodded firmly. "Mr. Harrow was particular about that. Only one key, kept on his person. He didn't trust duplicates." "Most interesting," Poirot said, leaning back. "A man who guards his office so closely, he guards his secrets too. Tell me, mademoiselle, you worked closely with Monsieur Harrow. Did he ever speak of these secrets? Of discrepancies, perhaps, in the accounts?" Her hands tightened in her lap, a movement so slight it might have gone unnoticed by a less observant eye. "Mr. Harrow was meticulous," she said carefully. "He often spoke of accuracy, of ensuring the books were correct. If there were discrepancies, he would have investigated them himself. He didn't share such matters with me." Poirot's gaze softened, but his tone remained incisive. "And yet, mademoiselle, a page was torn from his ledger, a page that perhaps held a truth he could not ignore. You had access to this ledger, no? You typed his letters, filed his papers. Did you ever see this page?" Clara's breath caught, and for a moment her composure wavered. I saw the ledger often, yes, but I didn't read it closely. My job was to organize, not to audit. If a page was missing, I wouldn't have noticed until it was pointed out." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but unrelenting. "Mademoiselle, you are loyal, and loyalty is a virtue. But it can also be a burden. You tremble when we speak of the ledger. Why is this?" Her eyes widened, and she clasped her hands tighter, as if to still them. "I'm upset, Mr. Poirot. Mr. Harrow was a good man, and to see him like that, it's dreadful. That's all." Hastings, unable to resist, interjected. "Come now, Miss Winters, you must know more than you're letting on. You were in that office every day. If Harrow was on to something, you'd have seen it, wouldn't you?" Clara's lips pressed into a thin line, and she turned to Hastings, her voice sharper than before. "I did my job, Captain Hastings. I typed, I filed, I answered calls. I didn't pry into Mr. Harrow's work, and he didn't invite me to." Poirot raised a hand, calming the exchange. "Peace, mon ami. Mademoiselle Winters, I do not doubt your diligence. But let us speak of another matter. Monsieur Sloane, your employer's partner, he is a man of charm, oui. You have worked with him closely, too. Did he and Monsieur Harrow ever disagree?" Clara's flush deepened, and her eyes darted away. "They were partners," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They had their differences, but nothing serious. Mr. Sloane handled clients. Mr. Harrow handled the books. They each had their role." Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the subtle shift in her tone. "And you, mademoiselle, what was your role with Monsieur Sloane? A secretary serves both partners, non? You typed his letters, perhaps, or managed his appointments?" "Yes," she said, her voice steadying. "I assisted both. Mr. Sloane was kind. He appreciated my work." "Kind," Poirot echoed, his tone thoughtful. "A word that carries many meanings. Tell me, mademoiselle, were you ever more than a secretary to Monsieur Sloane?" The question hung in the air, and Clara's face paled. Her hands, still clasped, trembled visibly now, and she drew a sharp breath. "I don't know what you mean, Mr. Poirot. I was his secretary. Nothing more." Hastings, sensing the tension, leaned forward. "Now, look here, Poirot. That's a bit forward, isn't it? Miss Winters is upset enough without—" Poirot silenced him with a glance. "Mon ami, the truth is often forward, but it must be pursued. Mademoiselle Winters, I do not ask to cause you pain, but to uncover what lies hidden. A broken heart, it can lead to silence, to loyalty, to secrets. You cared for Monsieur Sloane, perhaps, in a way that wasn't merely professional. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she held her head high. You're mistaken, Mr. Poirot. My engagement to Mr. Sloane ended 2 years ago. It was a private matter, and it has nothing to do with this. Poirot's expression softened, but his mind was racing. Engagement, he said quietly. A detail you did not share earlier, mademoiselle. And yet, it is a thread in this tapestry. You ended this engagement, or he did. I did, she said, her voice firm despite the tears. It was my choice. I wanted to focus on my work, my independence. Mr. Sloane respected that. Respected, Poirot repeated, his tone laced with a faint irony. And yet, you continued to work for him, to see him daily. A woman of strength, mademoiselle. But strength, it can hide pain, non? Clara rose abruptly, her composure fraying. I've told you all I know, Mr. Poirot. I didn't kill Mr. Harrow. I don't know who did. Please, may I go? Poirot stood, offering a courteous nod. Of course, mademoiselle. But remain in the village. The truth, it is like a shadow. It follows, even when we wish it would not. As Clara hurried out, her footsteps soft but swift, Hastings turned to Poirot, his face a mixture of indignation and curiosity. Really, Poirot, you were hard on her. The poor girl's shaken, and you go digging into her past like that. Poirot smiled faintly, adjusting his cuffs. Mon ami, the past is never truly past. It shapes the present, and in this case, it shapes a murder. Mademoiselle Winters is loyal. But to whom? To Harrow? To Sloane? Or to a secret she cannot yet reveal? He sipped his tisane, his eyes distant. The engagement, it is a clue. She ended it, she says, but her eyes, they speak of regret, of something unresolved, and her trembling at the mention of the ledger, it is not merely grief. She knows something, Hastings. Something she fears to say. Hastings frowned. But what? If she loved Sloane, why protect him? Or is she protecting someone else? Précisément, Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. That is the question. The ledger, the lock, the silence. They are connected, and Mademoiselle Winters is a link. We must watch her, mon ami, for she may lead us to the heart of this mystery. The tea-room clock struck 4, its chimes a gentle reminder of time's relentless march. Poirot set down his cup, his mind already turning to the next encounter. Come, Hastings. Monsieur Sloane awaits, and his charm, I suspect, will be a challenge as great as Mademoiselle Winters' silence. Chapter 6. The Partner's Charm. The evening had settled over St. Mary's Mead with a soft, golden glow, the village lamps flickering to life as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way to the Swan Inn, where Mr. Edward Sloane had agreed to meet them. The inn, a cosy establishment with low beams and a crackling fire, was abuzz with the quiet hum of locals, their conversations subdued by the weight of the day's tragedy. Poirot, his hat tilted at a precise angle, navigated the narrow tables with the grace of a dancer, his eyes scanning the room for their quarry. Hastings, trailing behind, seemed almost out of place in the rustic setting, his city polish at odds with the inn's homely charm. Edward Sloane stood by the bar, a glass of whisky in hand, his tailored suit as immaculate as if he had just stepped from a Savile Row fitting. His dark hair gleamed under the lamplight, and his smile, when he caught sight of Poirot, was as polished as his cufflinks. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, extending a hand with effortless warmth. "A pleasure, despite the grim circumstances. Shall we sit? I've taken the liberty of reserving a quiet corner." Poirot inclined his head, his green eyes sharp with appraisal. Monsieur Sloane, your courtesy is noted. A quiet corner is most suitable for matters of such gravity." They settled at a table near the fire, its warmth doing little to dispel the chill of the conversation to come. Sloane leaned back, his posture relaxed, one leg crossed over the other, his whiskey glass cradled casually in his hand. "I'm at your disposal, Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "Anything to help clear up this dreadful business about poor Harrow." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of his alertness. "Bon. Let us begin with your movements, Monsieur Sloane. You were in London this morning, oui? A breakfast meeting at the Savoy, I believe." Sloane nodded, producing a folded hotel bill from his pocket with a flourish. "Exactly. I met Mr. Percival Langdon, a wine merchant, at 7:30. We discussed a potential investment in his business. Nothing too thrilling, I'm afraid. I was done by 9, caught the 10 o'clock train back, and arrived here just after the constable's telegram reached me." Poirot examined the bill, noting the Savoy's crest and the timestamp, 8:45 a.m. "Most precise," he said, handing it back. "And this Monsieur Langdon. He will confirm your meeting." "Of course," Sloane said, his smile unwavering. "He's a busy man, but I've no doubt he'll corroborate. I've also got my train ticket, if you'd like to see it." Poirot waved a hand, his expression neutral. "In due time, monsieur. For, now, let us speak of your partnership with Monsieur Harrow. 5 years, you said. A long time to share a business. He was, I understand, a man of detail, while you are a man of people, non?" Sloane chuckled, a sound as polished as his demeanour. "You've got us pegged, Mr. Poirot. Harrow was the brains behind the numbers, fastidious to a fault. I handled the clients, the negotiations, the charm, if you will. It worked well. We balanced each other." "Balance," Poirot said, his tone thoughtful. "A delicate thing, easily disrupted. Were there ever disagreements, Monsieur Sloane? A matter, perhaps, where your charm could not smooth the way?" Sloane's smile flickered, but only for a moment. "Oh, we had our spats, like any partners. Harrow could be stubborn, always fussing over decimals and dates. But nothing serious. We both wanted the firm to succeed." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Sloane's. "And yet, monsieur, a page was torn from his ledger, a page that, perhaps, held a truth he could not ignore. You had access to this ledger, oui? Did you ever see this page?" Sloane's fingers tightened briefly on his glass, a movement so slight it might have gone unnoticed by a less discerning eye. "The ledger?" "I left the books to Harrow. He was the one poring over them day and night. If a page was missing, I wouldn't know. My job was to bring in clients, not to count their pennies." "Naturellement," Poirot said, his voice soft but incisive. "And yet, the missing page suggests a secret worth killing for. Tell me, Monsieur Sloane, did Monsieur Harrow ever speak of discrepancies in the accounts? Irregularities, perhaps, that troubled him?" Sloane sipped his whiskey, his composure intact. "He mentioned something about Blake's accounts once or twice, thought there might be errors. But that was Harrow's way, always digging for problems. I told him to let it be. Blake's a big client, and a bit of a hothead. No need to stir the pot." Poirot's gaze drifted to Sloane's wrist, where a gold watch gleamed under the cuff of his shirt. A faint scratch marred its surface, its edges sharp and recent. "Your watch, monsieur," Poirot said, his tone deceptively casual. "It is a fine piece, but it bears a mark, non? A scratch. much like one I observed on the doorframe of Monsieur Harrow's office. Sloane glanced at his watch, his smile tightening. This old thing? I must have knocked it somewhere. Hotels, trains, you know how it is. Nothing to do with Harrow's office, I assure you. Assurance is a comfort, Poirot said, but proof is a necessity. The scratch, it is precise, deliberate. It suggests a moment of carelessness or intent. Hastings, who had been listening with growing impatience, interjected. Look here, Sloane, you're awfully calm for a man whose partner's been murdered. And that alibi of yours, it's a bit too perfect, isn't it? London, the Savoy, a train. Ticket all ready to show. Sloane's eyes flashed, but his smile held. I'm calm, Captain, because I've nothing to hide. I liked Harrow, and I'm as shocked as anyone. As for my alibi, it's not perfect. It's true. Check with Langdon. Check the hotel. I wasn't here when it happened. Poirot raised a hand, silencing Hastings. Mon ami, let us not rush to judgment. Monsieur Sloane, you are a man of elegance, of control. But control, it can mask much. Tell me, what was your relationship with Mademoiselle Winters? She was your secretary, oui, but also perhaps something more. Sloane's smile faltered, and for the first time a shadow crossed his face. Clara? She's a fine secretary, efficient, loyal. We were engaged once, years ago, but that's ancient history. She ended it, wanted her independence. We've been professional ever since. Professional, Poirot echoed, his eyes narrowing. And yet, Mademoiselle Winters trembles when your name is mentioned. Loyalty. It is a powerful force, non? It can bind a heart, even when it is broken. Sloane set his glass down, his movements deliberate. You're fishing, Mr. Poirot. Clara's upset about Harrow, that's all. She's sensitive, always has been. Don't read more into it. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. I read only what is written, monsieur. And in your words, in your charm, I see a man who knows how to conceal. But the truth, it is like a mirror. It reflects, even when we turn away. He rose, adjusting his coat with a precise tug. Merci, Monsieur Sloane. Your candor is appreciated, and your alibi, it will be verified. For now, remain in the village. The little grey cells, they are at work, and they will not rest until the puzzle is solved. As Sloane stood, offering a polite nod before returning to the bar, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. He's slippery, Poirot. That smile, that alibi. It's all too neat. And that scratch on his watch? It's no coincidence, I'll bet. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet amusement. You see much, mon ami, but you leap too quickly. Sloane is a man of surfaces, polished, reflective. But what lies beneath? The watch, the charm, the broken engagement. They are pieces of the puzzle, but not yet the picture. They stepped out into the evening air, the village quiet save for the distant chime of the church clock striking 6. Poirot paused, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Monsieur Sloane is a performer, Hastings, and his stage is well set. But every performer has a moment when the mask slips. We must watch for it, and we must return to the scene. The lock, the ledger, the scratch. They hold the key, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall find it. Chapter 7. The Hidden Mechanism. The morning sun rose over St. Mary's Mead, casting a pale light through the mist that clung to the village's cobblestone streets. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the early hour, stood once more in the high offices of Harrow and Sons, his compact figure framed by the oak-panelled doorway of Thomas Harrow's office. The air was heavy with the lingering scent of blood and ink, a grim reminder of the crime that had shaken the village. Captain Hastings, rubbing sleep from his eyes, followed closely, his curiosity tempered by a growing respect for Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth. The office remained as Poirot had last seen it, the body of Harrow now removed to the morgue, but the desk still bore the stains of tragedy. The spilled ink-pot, the bloodied ledger, and the dagger's absence marked by a faint outline on the wood. Poirot's gaze, however, was fixed not on the desk, but on the door, its sturdy lock gleaming under the morning light. He had returned to this locked room, this puzzle of impossibility, with a singular purpose: to unravel the mechanism that had made a murder appear unassailable. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Hastings, "the locked door is the heart of this mystery. It is not merely a barrier, but a deception, a sleight of hand. We must find how it was done, for in that answer lies the murderer." Hastings frowned, glancing at the door. But Poirot, the key was in Harrow's pocket, the window latched, and Polk swears the lock wasn't tampered with. How could anyone get in or out? Poirot's moustache twitched, a spark of triumph in his eyes. "Précisément, Hastings. The impossibility is what makes it possible. A lock that appears secure, a key that appears singular. These are the tools of a clever mind. Come, let us examine this door with the eyes of Hercule Poirot." He knelt before the lock, his magnifying glass in hand, its lens catching the light as he peered into the keyhole. The brass was polished, unmarred by obvious scratches, but Poirot's keen eye detected the faint groove he had noted before, a subtle irregularity within the mechanism itself. He traced it with a gloved finger, his brow furrowing in concentration. "Curieux," he murmured. "This groove, it is not the work of wear. It is deliberate, precise. A hidden mechanism, perhaps?" Hastings, peering over his shoulder, shook his head. "A hidden mechanism in a simple office lock. That sounds like something out of a novel, Poirot." Poirot smiled faintly, undeterred. "The novels, mon ami, they take their inspiration from life. And life, it is full of clever tricks. Observe." He produced a small tool from his pocket, a slender probe, no thicker than a needle, and inserted it into the keyhole. With a delicate twist, he felt a faint resistance, followed by a soft click. The lock, which had seemed so unyielding, gave way slightly, revealing a secondary catch within. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Voilà! A spring, concealed within the lock. It holds the bolt in place, even when the key is turned. The door appears locked, but with the right touch, it opens." Hastings's jaw dropped. "Good Lord, Poirot, you mean the murderer could have slipped out, leaving the door locked behind them?" "Exactement," Poirot said, rising with a satisfied nod. The key in Harrow's pocket was a distraction, a prop in the murderer's play. They entered, killed, and exited, using this hidden spring to secure the door. Then they placed the key on the body to complete the illusion of an impossible crime. He stepped back, gesturing to the doorframe, where the faint scratch he had noticed earlier stood out in the morning light. "And this mark, Hastings, it is the accomplice of the lock. Something brushed against it, something metallic, perhaps, as the murderer worked their trick." Hastings rubbed his chin, his mind racing. "A tool, maybe. Or that and cane of Blake's. It had a nick, didn't it?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The cane, oui, or perhaps the watch of Monsieur Sloane, with its matching scratch. But we must not leap, mon ami. The mechanism tells us how, but not who. We must test this theory." He called for Constable Polk, who arrived promptly, his notebook clutched like a talisman. "Constable," Poirot said, I require a locksmith, one familiar with such mechanisms. There is a craftsman in the village, no? A Monsieur Hargreaves, perhaps?" Polk nodded eagerly. "Aye, sir. Old Hargreaves knows locks better than anyone. He fitted this one for Harrow years ago." "Bon," Poirot said. "Fetch him at once, and bring me any tools or keys found in this office or among the suspect's possessions. The smallest detail may be the key to the truth." While Polk hurried off, Poirot returned to the desk, his attention drawn once more to the ledger. Its torn edge, where a page had been ripped out, seemed to mock his efforts. He opened it carefully, noting the meticulous entries in Harrow's hand. Dates, figures, client names, all in perfect order, save for the missing page. "This ledger," he said to Hastings, "it is the motive, the secret that cost Harrow his life. But what did it contain? A record of fraud? A betrayal?" Hastings, ever practical, ventured, "Could it be Blake's accounts?" He was furious about Harrow's accusations. Maybe he tore it out to hide something. "Possible," Poirot said, "but too simple, perhaps. Blake is a man of temper, not subtlety. This crime, it is subtle, planned. The lock, the page, they speak of a mind that calculates, that conceals." He moved to the fireplace, where the faint dusting of ash still lingered. Kneeling, he sifted through it with his tweezers, retrieving another charred fragment of paper. This one bore a partial word, trans, in Harrow's precise script. "A transaction," Poirot murmured, "or a transfer." The missing page, it was burned, but not entirely destroyed. The murderer was careless or hurried. Hastings leaned closer, his excitement growing. "That's something, Poirot. If we can find more fragments, we might piece together what was on that page." Poirot nodded, slipping the fragment into an envelope. "Oui, but we must also consider why it was burned. To destroy evidence, yes, but why here, in Harrow's own fireplace? It suggests a familiarity with the office, a confidence that no one would look." Polk returned with Mr. Hargreaves, a stooped man with gnarled hands and a keen eye for mechanical detail. The locksmith examined the lock, his fingers deftly probing the keyhole. "Well, I'll be," he muttered. "There's a spring in there all right. Not my work, mind you. Someone's tampered with it, added a catch that holds the bolt even when the key's turned. Clever bit of work, but not invisible." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, Monsieur Hargreaves. And this catch, it could be operated without the key?" "Aye," Hargreaves said, nodding. "With a thin tool, you could set it from the inside, slip out, and the door'd stay locked. Key wouldn't matter." "Formidable," Poirot said, his voice alight with satisfaction. "The impossible murder is no longer impossible. The murderer entered, killed, and left, leaving the door locked and the key in Harrow's pocket to deceive us." Hargreaves produced a small tool from his kit, a slender probe not unlike Poirot's. "Found this in the office, sir, near the coat rack. Could have been used for the job." Poirot examined the tool, its tip bearing a faint scratch that matched the door frame's mark. "Excellent," he said. "This is a piece of the puzzle, Constable. Keep it safe, and compare it to any tools owned by our suspects. Monsieur Blake's cane, Monsieur Sloane's watch, Mademoiselle Winters's desk. Check them all." As Hargreaves and Polk departed, Hastings turned to Poirot, his face a mixture of awe and frustration. "You've cracked it, Poirot. The lock, the spring, it's brilliant. But who did it? Blake's got the temper, Sloane's got the charm, and Winters, well, she's hiding something, isn't she?" Poirot smiled, adjusting his hat. "Patience, mon ami. The mechanism reveals the how, but the who remains elusive. The ledger, the ash, the scratch, they point to a motive, a secret. We must now look to the heart of Harrow and Sons, the accounts themselves. The bank, Hastings. It will tell us what the ledger cannot. The village clock struck 9, its chimes echoing through the quiet streets. Poirot stepped out into the morning, his mind a whirl of connections. "The hidden mechanism," he said softly. "It is but one layer of this crime. The true deception lies in the human heart, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall uncover it." Chapter 8. The Ledger's Clue. The morning air in St. Mary's Mead carried a crisp edge, the village waking slowly under a sky streaked with pale clouds. Hercule Poirot, his coat buttoned against the chill, walked purposefully toward the local branch of Barclay's Bank, a modest building of grey stone that stood at the edge of the village square. Captain Hastings, striding beside him, seemed invigorated by the progress of the case, though his brow furrowed with the weight of unanswered questions. The discovery of the hidden lock mechanism had shifted the puzzle of Thomas Harrow's murder, but Poirot's mind was now fixed on the missing ledger page, a silent witness to the motive that had driven a killer to such cunning lengths. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but vibrant with purpose, "the ledger is the key to this crime. A page torn, a secret burned. This is no random act. It points to a truth that Monsieur Harrow uncovered, a truth worth his life. The bank, it will speak where the ledger is silent." Hastings nodded, his hands thrust into his pockets. "I say, Poirot, it's got to be about money, hasn't it? Fraud, embezzlement, something in the accounts that someone didn't want seen. Blake's the obvious choice, with his temper and those accusations Harrow made." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Obvious, Hastings, is often the enemy of truth. Monsieur Blake is a storm, yes, but storms are seen from afar. This crime, it is subtle, hidden. We must look beyond the obvious to the shadows." They entered the bank, its interior a study in quiet efficiency, polished counters, ticking clocks, and the soft rustle of paper as clerks moved through their tasks. The manager, Mr. Albert Finch, a wiry man with spectacles perched on a thin nose, greeted them with a mixture of deference and curiosity. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, ushering them into a small office. "Constable Polk said you'd be coming. A terrible business about poor Harrow. How can I assist?" Poirot settled into a chair, his posture impeccable, his eyes fixed on Finch. "Monsieur Finch, you handled the accounts of Harrow and Sons, oui? I wish to know of any irregularities, transactions, deposits, withdrawals, that might have troubled Monsieur Harrow in recent weeks." Finch adjusted his spectacles, his expression cautious. "Harrow was a meticulous man, Mr. Poirot. He reviewed the firm's accounts monthly, sometimes weekly. About a fortnight ago he came to me with concerns. Nothing concrete, mind you, but he suspected funds were being misdirected." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "Misdirected, you say? To where, and by whom?" Finch hesitated, glancing at the door as if to ensure privacy. He wasn't specific, but he mentioned an account, an untraceable one, he called it. Funds were being transferred from the firm's main account to this other, in small amounts, over several months. He showed me a ledger entry, a single page, with figures that didn't add up. He said he'd investigate further. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "This page, Monsieur Finch, it was from the ledger in his office, the one now missing a page?" Finch nodded, his face paling. "I believe so. He kept it close, said it was evidence. I urged him to report it, but he wanted proof. First, he was like that, never acted without certainty. Hastings, unable to contain himself, interjected. Evidence of what? Embezzlement. Who had access to those funds? Finch spread his hands. Only Harrow and his partner, Mr. Sloane, had authority over the firm's accounts. The secretaries, Miss Winters and her predecessor, handled paperwork, but not transactions. Clients like Mr. Blake deposited funds, but they couldn't withdraw or redirect them. Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on the arm of his chair. Monsieur Sloane, then, had the means to move these funds. Did Monsieur Harrow suspect him? Finch shifted uncomfortably. He didn't name names, Mr. Poirot, but he was troubled, more than I'd ever seen him. He said the discrepancies pointed to someone close, someone who knew the firm's workings intimately. Intimately, Poirot echoed, his voice soft but incisive. A partner, perhaps, or a trusted employee. Tell me, Monsieur Finch, these transfers, can you trace them? Do the records still exist? Finch nodded, rising to retrieve a file from a cabinet. I've kept copies of the transactions Harrow flagged. They're here, though the destination account is listed only as a number. No name, no address. It's unusual, but not illegal. The amounts were small enough to avoid notice, £50 here, 100 there, over months. He handed Poirot a sheaf of papers, each detailing a transfer from Harrow and Sons to the anonymous account. Poirot scanned them, his mind cataloguing the dates and figures. Most curious, he said. The sums are modest, but consistent. A slow bleed, designed to go unseen. And yet, Monsieur Harrow saw. Hastings leaned over, peering at the papers. That's got to be it, Poirot. The missing page listed these transfers, and someone killed Harrow to keep it quiet. Sloane's the only one who could have done it. Blake's a client, not a partner, and Winters wouldn't have the authority. Poirot raised a hand, his expression cautionary. Patience, mon ami. The ledger points to a motive, but not yet to a man. Monsieur Sloane is charming, oui, but charm does not make a murderer. We must consider all possibilities. Mademoiselle Winters, with her access to the office, or even Monsieur Blake, whose temper may hide a deeper cunning. He turned back to Finch. Merci, monsieur. These records are most illuminating. I ask that you keep them secure, and speak of this to no one. The murderer is clever, and they are watching. Finch nodded, his face grave. You have my word, Mr. Poirot. But if I may ask, what do you make of it? Was Harrow killed for this? Poirot's eyes narrowed, his voice low. He was killed, monsieur, because he saw what was meant to be hidden. The ledger's clue is clear. Someone stole from the firm, and Harrow's death ensured their silence. But the little grey cells, they do not remain silent. They work, they connect, and they will. Reveal. As they left the bank, the village square was quiet, save for the soft clatter of a milk cart and the distant bark of a dog. Hastings turned to Poirot, his excitement barely contained. This is it, Poirot. The missing page, the transfers, it's all coming together. Sloane's got to be our man. He had the means, the opportunity, and that watch scratch ties him to the door. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. You see the surface, Hastings, and it is a fine surface indeed. But beneath, there are currents. Loyalty, fear, betrayal. Mademoiselle Winters, she knows more than she says. Her silence, it protects someone. And Monsieur Blake, his anger may be a mask for something else. He paused, his gaze fixed on the offices of Harrow and Sons across the square. The ledger's clue is but one piece of the puzzle. The lock, the ash, the scratches, they all speak, and together they will sing the truth. We must now return to the scene, mon ami, and listen closely." Hastings frowned. "Back to the office? What's left to find?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet determination. "Everything, Hastings. The smallest detail. A thread, a smudge, a whisper, maybe the key. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall not rest until it is found." The village clock struck 11, its chimes a solemn reminder of the hours slipping away. Poirot adjusted his hat, his mind a whirl of connections, each clue a thread in the tapestry of murder. "The ledger's clue," he said softly. "It points to greed, to betrayal. But the heart of this crime lies not in numbers, but in the human soul. And that, mon ami, is where we shall find our killer." Chapter 9. The Confrontation. The late afternoon light bathed the offices of Harrow and Sons in a sombre glow, the shadows lengthening across the oak-panelled walls as Hercule Poirot prepared for the pivotal moment in his investigation. The room, once the scene of a brutal murder, now served as the stage for a gathering of suspects, each a thread in the intricate tapestry of Thomas Harrow's death. Captain Hastings stood by the window, his face a mixture of anticipation and unease, while Constable Palk hovered near the door, his notebook clutched tightly, ready to record the unfolding drama. Poirot, his compact figure radiating quiet authority, stood before the desk where Harrow had met his end, his green eyes gleaming with the certainty of a man who had pieced together a puzzle only he could solve. The suspects entered one by one, their expressions a study in contrast. Mr. Reginald Blake, his ruddy face set in a scowl, leaned heavily on his silver-topped cane, his eyes darting toward the blood-stained ledger still open on the desk. Miss Clara Winters followed, her pale features composed, but her hands clasped tightly, betraying a tension she could not fully conceal. Mr. Edward Sloane entered last, his polished demeanor unshaken, a faint smile playing on his lips as he adjusted his cufflinks with practiced ease. The ho-ho-hat air was thick with unspoken questions, and Poirot, sensing the weight of their collective gaze, began to speak. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice clear and measured, "we are gathered to unravel the mystery of Monsieur Thomas Harrow's death, a murder most cunning, committed in a room locked from within, with a page torn from his ledger and a dagger in his heart. The impossible, it seems, has been done. But I, Hercule Poirot, declare that the impossible is merely a disguise for the truth, and today that disguise shall be removed." He paced slowly before them, his hands clasped behind his back, his moustache a perfect arc of determination. "Let us begin with the locked door, the heart of this deception. The key was found in Monsieur Harrow's pocket, the window latched, the lock unforced. Yet a hidden mechanism, a spring within the lock, allowed the murderer to exit and leave the door secured, placing the key on the body to complete the illusion. A clever trick, non, but not clever enough to escape the little grey cells." Blake shifted, his cane tapping the floor. "What's this nonsense about a spring? You're saying someone tampered with the lock?" "Précisément," Poirot said, his eyes fixed on Blake. "A slender tool, found in this office, was used to set the spring, and on the doorframe a scratch, small but telling, matches a mark on an object carried by one among us." His gaze moved to Sloane, whose smile faltered briefly. "A scratch, Monsieur Poirot? Surely you don't mean to accuse based on something so trivial?" Poirot's lips curved faintly. "Nothing is trivial in a murder, Monsieur Sloane. The scratch on your watch, it is a twin to the mark on the doorframe. A coincidence, perhaps, or a sign of your presence at the moment of the crime." Sloane's smile tightened, but he spread his hands. "My watch? I've knocked it about in London, on trains, in hotels. You can't pin a murder on a scratch." Poirot nodded, undeterred. "We shall see. But let us turn to the ledger, the true motive for this crime. A page was torn, its contents burned, but fragments remain. Numbers, a word, trans. Monsieur Finch, the bank manager, confirmed that funds were siphoned from Harrow and Sons to an untraceable account, a slow theft discovered by Monsieur Harrow. The missing page, it held the proof of this betrayal. Clara Winter's hands trembled, and she spoke, her voice soft, but sharp. "You're saying someone was stealing? But who? Mr. Harrow never mentioned anything to me." Poirot turned to her, his gaze gentle but piercing. "Mademoiselle Winters, you are loyal, and loyalty blinds. You had access to the office, to the ledger, yet you claim ignorance. But you're trembling, your silence when Monsieur Sloane is mentioned. It speaks of a deeper truth. You were once engaged to him, oui? A bond that, perhaps, still holds your heart." Clara's face paled, and she shook her head. "That's over, Mr. Poirot. I told you, it ended years ago. I had nothing to do with this." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but your eyes, they betray you. You fear for someone, mademoiselle, and that fear keeps you silent." He turned to Blake, whose scowl had deepened. "Monsieur Blake, your temper is known, and your argument with Monsieur Harrow was fierce. He accused you of discrepancies, no? Yet the bank records show your accounts were clean. The ink on your cuff, it is from signing checks, not from the crime. Your anger, it is real, but it is not the heart of this murder." Blake's shoulders relaxed slightly, though his voice remained gruff. "Told you I didn't do it. Harrow was a fool to question me, but I didn't kill him." Poirot's gaze returned to Sloane, whose smile now seemed a fragile mask. "Monsieur Sloane, you are a man of charm, of alibis. London, the Savoy, a train ticket, all so neatly arranged. But the bank records tell a different story. Funds were moved, small amounts, to an account only you or Monsieur Harrow could access. Harrow found the truth, wrote it in his ledger, and you, monsieur, could not allow that truth to live." Sloane laughed, a hollow sound. "This is absurd, Poirot. I was in London when it happened. Langdon will confirm it. The hotel bill, the ticket. Check them." "I have," Poirot said, his voice like steel. "Monsieur Langdon confirms a meeting, but at 8, not 7:30. The train ticket, it is for a later train, one that could bring you to Saint. Mary's mead in time for murder. Your watch, its scratch matches the doorframe. The tool, found in the office, fits the lock's hidden spring. And the ledger's missing page, it pointed to your theft, your betrayal." Sloane's smile vanished, his face paling. "You have no proof, Poirot. This is speculation. Nothing more." Poirot stepped closer, his eyes unyielding. "The proof is in the details, monsieur. The ash in the fireplace, it holds fragments of the page you burned. The tool, it bears your initials, E.S., etched faintly on its handle. You entered the office early, before Mademoiselle Winters arrived. You stabbed Monsieur Harrow, tore the page, burned it, and used the hidden spring to lock the door, placing the key in his pocket. A perfect crime, you thought, but perfection. It betrays you." Clara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Edward, No, it can't be. Sloane's composure cracked, his voice rising. This is madness. I'm no murderer. You can't prove any of this. Poirot's voice was calm, relentless. The little grey cells, monsieur. They see what you hide. You stole from the firm, and Harrow's diligence threatened to expose you. You killed to protect your secret. But the ledger, the lock, the scratch, they speak against you. Blake stood, his cane thudding on the floor. If this is true, Sloane, you're a damned scoundrel. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she remained, silent, her gaze fixed on Sloane. Poirot turned to Polk. Constable, take Monsieur Sloane into custody. The evidence, it will be confirmed, and the truth, it will be revealed. Sloane's shoulders slumped, his charm crumbling like a house of cards. You're wrong, Poirot, he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. As Polk led him away, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression sombre. The confrontation, mon ami, it is but the beginning. The truth is near, but we must ensure it holds. Hastings shook his head, awestruck. You've done it, Poirot. The lock, the ledger, the watch. You saw it all. Poirot's smile was faint. I see, Hastings, because I look. The human heart it hides, but the little grey cells they find. The village clock struck 5, its chimes echoing through the quiet office. Poirot adjusted his hat, his mind already turning to the final pieces of the puzzle, ready to seal the truth in the crimson ledger's shadow. Chapter 10. The Confession. The twilight draped St. Mary's Mead in a soft veil of purple and gold, the village settling into a hush, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the faint clatter of shutters being drawn. Within the confines of the local police station, a small, stone-walled building that smelled of damp plaster and strong tea, Hercule Poirot stood before a barred cell where Edward Sloane sat, his once polished demeanour now frayed like a well-worn coat. The charm that had defined him was gone, replaced by a taut expression, his dark eyes flickering with a mix of defiance and resignation. Captain Hastings, standing beside Poirot, shifted uneasily, his hands clasped behind his back, while Constable Polk lingered near the door, his pencil poised over his ever-present notebook. Poirot's posture was erect, his moustache a perfect crescent of resolve, his green eyes fixed on Sloane with an intensity that seemed to pierce the dim light. "Monsieur Sloane," he began, his voice calm but unyielding, "the game is over. The lock, the ledger, the scratch on your watch, they have spoken, and they accuse you. But the truth, it demands more than clues. It demands your words. Speak, and let us end this masquerade." Sloane leaned back against the cell wall, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on his knee. For a moment he said nothing, his gaze fixed on the floor, as if searching for an escape that no longer existed. Then, with a bitter laugh, he looked up, his smile a shadow of its former self. "You're a clever man, Poirot. Too clever, perhaps. I thought I'd accounted for everything. The lock, the key, the page. But you see too much." Poirot inclined his head, his expression unchanged. "I see only what is there, monsieur. The little grey cells, they arrange the pieces, and the picture is clear. You killed Monsieur Harrow to hide your theft, and you used the hidden mechanism to stage a locked room mystery. But the details, they betray you. Tell me, why did you do it?" Sloane's jaw tightened, and he ran a hand through his hair, disheveling its once sleek perfection. "It wasn't meant to end like this," he said, his voice low, almost a murmur. "Harrow was a good man, too good, perhaps. He lived for his numbers, his ledgers. I never wanted to hurt him, but he left me no choice. Hastings, unable to contain himself, stepped forward. No choice? You stabbed a man in cold blood, Sloane. For what? Money? You had a successful firm, a good life. Why throw it away? Sloane's eyes flashed, a spark of his old fire returning. A good life. You think balancing books in this backwater was enough for me? I wanted more. London, investments, a chance to live, not just exist. The firm was profitable, but slow, plodding. I saw opportunities, risks Harrow wouldn't take, so I borrowed a little here and there. Poirot's voice was soft, cutting through the tension like a blade. Borrowed, monsieur? You mean stole? The bank records show transfers to an untraceable account. Your account, non? Small sums, carefully hidden, until Monsieur Harrow's diligence uncovered them. Sloane nodded, his shoulders slumping. He was relentless. 2 weeks ago, he showed me a page from the ledger, figures circled in red. He'd traced the transfers, knew they weren't client payments. He didn't accuse me outright, not then, but I could see it in his eyes. He was building a case, checking every entry. I begged him to let it go, said I'd repay it, but he wouldn't listen. The truth must out, he said. Damn fool. Poirot's gaze never wavered. And so, you acted. Tell me, monsieur, how it was done. Sloane drew a deep breath, his voice steadying, as if relieved to unburden himself. I knew the lock. Harrow had it fitted years ago, but I'd tinkered with it, added the spring. It was a precaution, in case I ever needed to adjust things quietly. That morning I came early, before Clara arrived. Harrow was at his desk, already poring over the ledger. I tried to reason with him, offered to confess to the clients, to make it right. But he was stubborn, said he'd go to the bank, maybe the police. I couldn't let that happen. He paused, his eyes distant, reliving the moment. The dagger was on his desk, a letter opener, really, but sharp. I don't know what came over me. I grabbed it, and it was quick. He didn't even cry out, just looked at me, shocked, as he fell. I tore out the page, burned it in the fireplace, but I didn't have time to clear all the ash. I set the lock's spring, slipped out, and put the key in his pocket. I thought it was perfect. Thought I'd get away clean. Poirot's voice was soft, almost sorrowful. Perfection, monsieur, is the enemy of the criminal. The ash, the scratch on your watch, the tool with your initials. They were your undoing. You burned the page, but fragments remained. You locked the door, but the spring betrayed you. And your alibi, so carefully crafted, it crumbled under scrutiny. Sloane's laugh was bitter, hollow. I underestimated you, Poirot. The Savoy, the train ticket, I thought they'd hold. Langdon was a friend, willing to stretch the truth about our meeting time. But you saw through it all. Hastings, his face flushed with indignation, stepped closer to the bars. And Clara? Did you use her, too? She was loyal to you, even after you broke her heart. Sloane's expression softened, a flicker of regret crossing his face. Clara? She didn't know. She suspected something, maybe, but I kept her in the dark. She loved me once, and I think she still did, in her way. That's why she stayed quiet, why she trembled. Not guilt. Fear for me. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. Fear, oui, and loyalty. But her silence, it protected a guilty man. You used her heart, monsieur, as you used the lock, the ledger, the firm itself. Sloane's head bowed, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted more. And now, it's all gone. Poirot stepped back, his expression sombre but resolute. "The truth, monsieur. It is a heavy burden, but it is now yours to carry. Constable Pork, ensure the evidence, the tool, the ash, the bank records, is secured for the trial. The law, it will take its course." Pork nodded, scribbling furiously in his notebook. "Right, sir. I'll see to it." As Sloane was led back to his cell, his footsteps echoing in the stone corridor, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice a mix of awe and relief. "You've done it, Poirot. The confession, the evidence, it's airtight. He can't wriggle out of this." Poirot's smile was faint, tinged with melancholy. "Airtight, mon ami. But at what cost? A man is dead, a woman's heart broken, a firm ruined. The truth restores order, but it doesn't erase pain." He adjusted his coat, his gaze distant. "The confession is the final piece, but the puzzle is not complete without justice. We must ensure the evidence is presented, the fragments preserved. The ledger's shadow is long, Hastings, but it is now illuminated." The station clock ticked loudly, marking the hour as 6. Poirot stepped into the evening air, the village quiet under the gathering dusk. "Come, mon ami," he said softly. "The case is solved, but the heart, it lingers. Let us walk, and let the little grey cells rest, for now." Chapter 11. The Aftermath. The morning following Edward Sloane's confession dawned clear and bright over St. Mary's Mead, the village stirring with a cautious return to its familiar rhythms. The shock of Thomas Harrow's murder still lingered, whispered in the bakery, the post office, and the tea-room, but a sense of resolution had begun to settle, like dust after a storm. Hercule Poirot, his mission nearly complete, sat at a small table in the Swan Inn, his tisane steaming before him, its herbal scent a quiet comfort. Captain Hastings, opposite him, sipped a cup of tea, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and lingering unease, as if the case's resolution had not fully dispelled its shadows. The inn's dining-room was sparsely populated, the hour too early for the usual crowd of villagers. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the polished wood and starched linens. Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, surveyed the room with a quiet intensity, his mind still turning over the details of the case, ensuring no thread remained unknotted. "Mon ami," he said, his voice low but clear, "the puzzle is solved. The murderer confessed, yet the aftermath, it is as important as the crime itself. Order must be restored, and the wounds of this tragedy, they must begin to heal." Hastings set down his cup, his brow furrowing. "It's a grim business, Poirot. Sloane's behind bars, but poor Harrow's gone, and the firm's in tatters. Not to mention Miss Winters. She's lost everything, hasn't she?" Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching slightly. "Oui, Hastings. But the truth, it is a balm, even when it stings. Let us review the final pieces to ensure the tapestry is complete." The door opened, admitting Constable Pork, his face flushed with the morning's chill. He carried a small bundle of papers, the fruits of his diligent work. "Morning, Mr. Poirot, Captain," he said, setting the bundle on the table. "I've got the evidence sorted, like you asked. The tool with Sloane's initials, the bank records, and the ash fragments from the fireplace. They're all secured for the trial. Found something else, too. More bits of that burned page in Sloane's flat, tucked in his hearth." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he examined the fragments, each bearing faint traces of Harrow's precise handwriting. Numbers, a partial signature, the word transfer now unmistakable. "Formidable, Constable," he said, slipping the fragments into an envelope. These confirm the ledger's secret, Sloane's theft, meticulously recorded by Monsieur Harrow. The trial it will be swift, for the evidence is undeniable." Polk nodded, his relief palpable. "Never seen a case like this, sir. That lock trick, the burned page. You saw it all when we were stumped." Poirot's smile was modest, almost wistful. "The little grey cells, Constable. They see what the eyes miss. But you have done well to preserve the truth. Now, tell me of Mademoiselle Winters and Monsieur Blake. How do they fare?" Polk scratched his head, his expression sombre. "Miss Winters handed in her notice this morning. Says she can't stay at the firm, not after everything. She's packing to leave the village, going to her sister in Brighton, I hear. Can't say I blame her, poor lass." Poirot's gaze softened. "A broken heart seeks distance, Constable. Mademoiselle Winters loved Monsieur Sloane, even after their engagement ended. Her silence protected him, but it could not save him. She will heal in time, but the scar, it remains." Hastings leaned forward, his voice earnest. "And Blake? He was cleared, but he's not exactly the forgiving type. Will he make trouble for the firm?" Polk shook his head. "Surprising thing, sir. Blake came by the station yesterday, after Sloane's arrest. Said he's willing to fund the firm's recovery. Keep it running in Harrow's memory, he said. Wants to hire a new accountant, keep the clients on. Didn't think he had it in him, to be honest." Poirot's moustache twitched with approval. "Monsieur Blake is a man of temper, oui, but also of pride. His name was questioned, but now it is clear. He seeks to restore his honour, and in doing so, he honours Monsieur Harrow. A fitting gesture." He sipped his tisane, his mind turning to the broader ripples of the case. "The firm of Harrow and Sons, it will survive, though it bears a new name, a new purpose. The village, too, will mend, for communities like Hart's are resilient. But we must ensure the evidence is presented with precision, Constable. The law, it demands clarity." Polk nodded, tucking his notebook away. "I'll see to it, sir. The magistrate's got the papers, and the trial set for next week. Sloane's not talking any more, but he's not denying it either." "Bon," Poirot said, rising from his chair. "Then our work here is nearly done. But let us visit the office one last time, Hastings. The scene of the crime, it holds no more secrets. But it deserves a final farewell." They made their way to Harrow and Sons, the village square quiet save for the soft clatter of a delivery cart. The office, now stripped of its grim occupant, felt oddly hollow, the desk cleared of blood and ink, the ledger sealed in evidence bags. Poirot stood before the door, his fingers tracing the faint scratch on the frame, a relic of Sloane's fatal deception. "This mark," he said softly. It was the first whisper of truth. The lock, the ledger, the ash, they all spoke, and we listened. Hastings, standing by the window, looked out at the village. "It's strange, Poirot, a place like this, so peaceful, and yet it hid such a crime. Sloane seemed so respectable. How did you know it was him?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet pride. "I knew, mon ami, because I observed. The charm, it was too perfect. The alibi, too neat. The scratch on his watch, the tool with his initials, the fragments in the ash. They were not accidents, but signatures. And Mademoiselle Winters' silence, it pointed to a loyalty that only love could explain. The little grey cells, they connect what the heart conceals." He turned to the desk, his gaze lingering on the empty space where the ledger had lain. "Monsieur Harrow was a man of order, of truth. His death was a violation of that order, but we have restored it. The ledger, it balances now, in its own way. As they stepped out into the square, the quay village clock struck 10, its chimes a gentle reminder of time's steady march. Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression serene, but tinged with the melancholy of a case concluded. The aftermath, Hastings, it is not the end, but a new beginning. For Mademoiselle Winters, for Monsieur Blake, for this village. And for us, mon ami, it is time to move on. Hastings grinned, a spark of his usual cheer returning. Another triumph for Poirot, eh? Where to next? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Wherever the truth calls, Hastings. But for now, a cup of tisane, and perhaps a moment to reflect. The little grey cells, they deserve their rest. Chapter 12. The Quiet Departure. The final morning in St. Mary's Mead broke with a gentle clarity, the autumn sun casting a golden sheen over the village's thatched roofs and winding lanes. The air was crisp, scented with wood smoke and the faint sweetness of ripening apples, a reminder of life's persistence, despite the shadow of the tragedy. Hercule Poirot stood at the platform of the village's modest railway station, his valise neatly packed, his coat immaculate, and his moustache a perfect arc of symmetry. Captain Hastings, ever his loyal companion, fidgeted beside him, checking his watch as the distant whistle of the approaching train echoed through the morning mist. The Swan Inn, where they had taken their final breakfast, had been abuzz with the village's muted excitement. Gossip tempered by relief that the murderer of Thomas Harrow had been unmasked. Poirot, sipping his customary tisane, had listened to the murmurs with a quiet satisfaction, his mind already turning from the solved puzzle to the promise of new challenges. Now, as the train's smoke curled on the horizon, he adjusted his hat, his green eyes reflecting a serenity born of order restored. "Mon ami," he said, turning to Hastings. Another case concluded, another truth revealed. The Crimson Ledger, it has been balanced, and St. Mary's Mead may sleep soundly once more. Hastings grinned, his earlier unease replaced by admiration. "You've done it again, Poirot. That lock, the ledger, Sloane's confession. You saw through it all when the rest of us were stumped. I say, how do you do it? What's the trick?" Poirot's smile was faint, almost wistful. "There is no trick, Hastings. It is a method, observation, and the little grey cells. I look where others glance. I listen where others hear noise. The scratch on the doorframe, the ash in the fireplace, the tremble in Mademoiselle Winter's hands. These are not mere details, but voices, each telling a part of the story." He gestured toward the village, its chimneys just visible through the mist. This place, it seemed so tranquil, yet it hid a crime of cunning and greed. Monsieur Sloane, with his charm and his watch, thought he could outwit the truth. But the truth, mon ami, it is like the sun. It rises, no matter how we try to hide it. Hastings nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Poor Miss Winters, though. She's off to Brighton," Polk said. "Do you think she'll be all right?" Poirot's gaze softened. "Mademoiselle Winters is strong, Hastings, though her heart is wounded. She protected Monsieur Sloane out of love. But love, it cannot shield a guilty man forever. In Brighton, she will find a new path, a new purpose. The heart, it heals, though it carries its scars." The train's whistle grew louder, and the platform vibrated faintly as the engine approached, its black bulk emerging from the mist. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice taking on a lighter tone. And Monsieur Blake, his gesture to save the firm. It is unexpected, no? A man of temper, yet capable of generosity. It reminds us, Hastings, that the human soul is complex, full of contradictions. Hastings chuckled. I'll say, I thought Blake might tear the place down after Harrow accused him. But funding the firm, that's a turn I didn't see coming. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet amusement. The little grey cells, they anticipate such turns. Monsieur Blake's pride was wounded, but his honour, it demanded restitution. In saving Harrow and Sons, he saves his own name. The train pulled into the station, steam hissing from its engine as passengers began to disembark. Poirot picked up his valise, his movements precise and deliberate. Come, mon ami. London awaits, and with it, perhaps, another puzzle. The world, it is never short of mysteries. Hastings hesitated, glancing back at the village. It's odd, Poirot. This place feels so peaceful now, but a week ago it was hiding a murder. Makes you wonder what's lurking under the surface of every quiet village. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Everywhere, Hastings, there are secrets, but they cannot hide from Hercule Poirot. I observe, I think, and I listen to the silence between the words. That is the secret of the little grey cells. As they boarded the train, the carriage warm and smelling faintly of polished wood and coal, Poirot settled into his seat, his valise at his side. Hastings, peering out the window, watched St. Mary's Mead recede into the distance, its rooftops swallowed by the mist. Another triumph, eh, Poirot? He said, turning back with a grin. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his expression serene. A triumph, oui, but also a lesson. The Crimson Ledger taught us that greed can corrupt, but truth, it endures. Now, mon ami, let us enjoy this journey, for soon another mystery will call. The train lurched forward, carrying them away from the village and its secrets. Poirot closed his eyes, a faint smile lingering, his mind already drifting to the next challenge, the next truth waiting to be unveiled by the unerring precision of his little grey cells.